Sometimes the hardest part of living alone isn't the silence, it's learning to trust that silence won't break you. Brenna Mott had spent 15 years in these Blue Ridge Mountains, convincing herself she preferred it that way. At 63, she knew every trail, every season, every sound these woods could make. This November morning started like any other hunt. She spotted the doe 30 yards out, raised her rifle, and steadied her breath. Then the animal made a sound that stopped her cold, a desperate cry she'd never heard in 40 years of hunting. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. What happened next would pull her back into a world she'd walked away from the day she buried her husband and left her family behind. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road that barely deserved the name. 2 miles of switchbacks and washouts that kept most folks from bothering to visit, which was exactly how Brenna Mott wanted it. She'd bought this place with Tom 32 years ago, back when their kids were still young enough to think a weekend in the mountains meant adventure instead of punishment. Back then, it had been their escape. A rough-hewn sanctuary where they could pretend the world didn't exist for a few precious days. Now it was just her world. All of it. The November cold had settled into the valley overnight, turning the morning mist into something thick and silver. Brenna stood on her porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the sun try to burn through the fog. Her breath came out in small clouds. The thermometer nailed to the porch post read 34 degrees. Good hunting weather. The kind of morning when deer moved slow and careless, their guard down just enough. She'd built this life carefully, piece by piece, after Tom died. 15 years of learning to be alone, without going crazy. Some days were easier than others. Some days she could almost convince herself she'd made the right choice, walking away from her children, from the grandchild she'd never met, from everything that reminded her of what she'd lost. The cabin was small but solid. Tom had reinforced it himself over the years, replacing rotted boards and sealing gaps against the winter wind. One main room served as kitchen, living area, and workspace. A wood stove sat in the corner, its cast-iron surface radiating heat that made the whole space livable. 2 small bedrooms branched off the back, one she slept in, the other filled with supplies. Dried herbs hung from the rafters. Shelves lined the walls, packed with canned goods, ammunition, medical supplies, rope, batteries, anything she might need when the mountain decided to remind her who was really in charge. She'd learned to be self-sufficient because she had to be. The nearest town was Ridgemont, population 800, 23 miles down the mountain. She made the drive once a month for supplies she couldn't grow, hunt, or make herself. The folks there knew her by sight, but not by name. She paid cash, said thank you, and left. That was the extent of her social life. Tom used to joke that she was part mountain lion content in her territory, fierce when cornered and stubborn as hell. He'd been the social one, the man who could talk to anyone about anything. When he died sudden, a heart attack, while splitting wood behind the cabin, something in Brenna had died too. Not the will to live exactly, but the will to live among people. Their son, Michael, had tried at first. He'd driven up from Charlotte 3 times in the first year, each visit more strained than the last. Brenna had been drowning in grief, and instead of reaching for the rope he kept throwing, she'd pulled away, pushed him back, told him she needed time. Eventually, he'd stopped coming. Their daughter, Sophie, had been more persistent. She'd called every week for 2 years. She'd written letters. She'd driven up unannounced, and Brenna, in her stubborn pride and bottomless grief, had shut her out too. The final visit was burned into Brenna's memory like a brand. Sophie had been 6 months pregnant, glowing and terrified and desperate for her mother. She'd stood on this very porch, tears streaming down her face, begging Brenna to come back to the world. "I need you, Mom. This baby needs you. Please." And Brenna, God help her, had said no, had told Sophie she couldn't be the grandmother they needed, that she had nothing left to give, that they were better off without her. Sophie had left without another word. That was 12 years ago. The photograph sat in the top drawer of Brenna's dresser, tucked under a stack of wool socks. She hadn't looked at it in months, but she knew every detail by heart. Tom's arm around her shoulders. Michael, 16 and gangly, trying to look tough. Sophie, 13, grinning with braces. They'd taken it on this porch, late summer, a lifetime ago. Sometimes Brenna wondered if she kept it hidden because looking at it hurt too much, or because some part of her was afraid she'd stop hurting if she looked at it too often. The coffee had gone cold in her hand. She tossed it off the porch and went inside. Her hunting rifle leaned against the wall by the door, a Winchester Model 70 that had belonged to Tom. He'd maintained it religiously, and she'd kept up the tradition. Every Sunday, she cleaned and oiled it, checking the scope alignment, running a bore snake through the barrel. The rifle was more than a tool. It was a connection to the man who'd taught her to shoot, to track, to read the forest like a book written in a language most people never learned. She dressed in layers. Thermal underwear, flannel shirt, fleece vest, canvas jacket, pulled on thick wool socks and her hiking boots, grabbed her pack already loaded with water, energy bars, first aid kit, rope, knife, emergency blanket, matches, and a compass. Tom's compass, actually, a brass antique he'd carried for 40 years. The back was engraved, "Find your way home, TM." She'd found her way to this cabin. Whether that counted as home was a question she tried not to ask. Outside, the world had that particular stillness that came before the forest woke up. No birds yet, no rustle of squirrels in the leaf litter, just the whisper of wind through bare branches and the distant sound of water running over rocks. Brenna moved through it like a ghost, her boots finding the trail by memory more than sight. She knew this land the way some people knew their childhood home. Every ridge, every hollow, every seasonal creek bed. She knew where the deer bedded down and where they came to drink, knew which clearings would be busy at dawn and which stayed empty until dusk. 40 years of hiking these mountains with Tom, then 15 alone, had made her part of the landscape. The trail climbed steadily, winding through oak and hickory and the occasional stand of white pine. The fog was starting to break up, shafts of golden light cutting through the canopy. Brenna's breath came steady and easy despite the incline. She might be 63, but she was in better shape than most people half her age. When your survival depended on physical capability, you stayed strong or you died. Simple as that. She reached her usual spot just as the sun cleared the eastern ridge, a natural clearing where 3 game trails converged. Good visibility, good cover, good shooting lanes. She settled into position behind a fallen oak, checking her rifle one more time. Then she waited. Hunting, real hunting, was about patience. It was about becoming part of the landscape, so still and quiet that the forest forgot you were there. Brenna had always been good at that, making herself invisible, making herself disappear. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The forest came alive. Gradually, a crow calling from somewhere to the south, a woodpecker hammering on dead wood, the chittering scold of a squirrel who'd spotted something it didn't like. Brenna's mind drifted the way it always did in these quiet moments, touching on memories like old bruises, wondering if Michael ever thought about her, wondering if Sophie had had more children, wondering if movement. Brenna's attention snapped back to the present. 30 yards out, at the edge of the clearing, a doe stepped into view. Medium-sized, healthy, moving with the cautious grace of a creature that knew it was prey. Perfect. Brenna slowly brought the rifle to her shoulder, settling the scope's crosshairs just behind the doe's front leg. Heart shot, quick and clean. She'd field dress it here, pack out the meat over 2 trips. Venison would get her through most of the winter. Her finger rested on the trigger. She controlled her breathing, waiting for the space between heartbeats when the shot would be truest. The doe lifted its head, ears swiveling forward. It took 2 steps and stopped, looking back toward the tree line. Then it made the sound. It wasn't a bleat or a snort or any of the normal vocalizations Brenna had heard in 4 decades of hunting. It was something else entirely, a desperate, guttural cry that seemed to carry pain and fear and something almost human. The sound sent a chill down Brenna's spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. She lifted her finger off the trigger, watching. The doe cried out again, that same terrible sound, and stamped its front hooves. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. A healthy doe in November should be focused on food, on building reserves for the coming winter. This animal was agitated, distressed, trying to communicate something. Brenna lowered the rifle, her heart pounding. In all her years in these mountains, she'd never seen a deer behave like this. The doe turned and looked directly at her, as if it knew exactly where she was hiding. Their eyes met across 30 yards of autumn forest. Then the animal turned and bounded toward the northern tree line, stopping after a few yards to look back. It was waiting. Brenna stood slowly, slinging the rifle across her back. Every instinct she'd honed over a lifetime in the wilderness told her to follow. Something was wrong in her forest, and she needed to know what. She moved forward carefully, keeping the doe in sight. The animal watched her approach, ears forward, body tense but not fleeing. When Brenna was 20 yards away, the doe turned and trotted into the trees, pausing again to make sure Brenna followed. "All right," Brenna murmured. "Show me." The doe led her off the main trail, down a steep slope, thick with mountain laurel and rhododendron. Brenna had to use her hands sometimes, grabbing branches for balance, her boots sliding on wet leaves. The terrain here was rough, not somewhere she'd choose to hike unless she had a good reason. The doe stayed just ahead, always visible, that strange cry coming every few moments like a beacon or a warning. They descended into a narrow ravine where a seasonal creek cut through granite. The doe stopped on the far bank, looking back one last time. Then it melted into the forest and was gone. Brenna stood there, breathing hard from the climb down, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. She was about to head back up when something caught her eye. There, caught on a branch of a young hemlock, was a piece of fabric. Bright red fabric, small. Brenna's heart lurched. She crossed the creek in 2 steps and pulled the fabric free. It was a child's jacket sized for maybe a 7- or 8-year-old, waterproof synthetic material, still damp from the morning dew. One sleeve was torn, the zipper broken. She looked around, her trained eyes searching for signs. There, in the soft mud beside the creek, small footprints. A child's footprints, the treads from sneakers, not hiking boots. Recent, made sometime in the last few hours while the ground was still soft from yesterday's rain. Brenna's throat went tight. A child was out here, lost, alone, in terrain that could kill an adult, let alone a scared kid. She pulled her rifle around and chambered around, not for hunting now, but for signaling. 3 shots in quick succession meant distress, and even this far from town someone might hear. But first, she needed to know more, needed to understand what she was dealing with. She followed the tracks upstream, moving fast but careful, her eyes scanning for more signs, more footprints, small and erratic, a crushed fern where someone had stepped, a smear of mud on a rock. The trail was only a few hours old, which meant the child might still be close, might still be alive. Brenna's hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in 15 years. Purpose. The need to act, to help, to do something that mattered beyond her own. Survival. She pressed forward, following the desperate trail of a lost child into the wilderness she knew better than her own reflection. The tracks led Brenna deeper into terrain. She rarely traveled a section of the mountain where the slopes got meaner and the forest grew thick enough to block out the sky. She moved as fast as the ground allowed, her eyes constantly scanning for signs, her ears straining for any sound that might be a child's voice. The footprints told a story that made her chest ache. The child had been running at first, the prints deep and far apart, driven by panic. Then the gait had changed, shorter steps, uneven, like someone who was tiring or hurt or both. There were places where small handprints showed in the mud, where the kid had fallen and caught themselves. places where they'd stopped and circled, disoriented, trying to figure out which way to go. Brenna had seen people die in these mountains. Experienced hikers who'd made one wrong turn, one bad decision. A child alone out here, especially as temperatures dropped, had hours at best before hypothermia or injury or simple exhaustion made survival impossible. She climbed over a moss-covered log and spotted something that made her stop cold. An arrow. Not a hunting arrow, wrong size, wrong fletching. It was embedded in the trunk of an oak tree about chest-high, the shaft broken off. Fresh, no rust on the broadhead. She looked closer and saw blood on the bark. Not much, but enough. The doe. Someone had shot the doe she'd been tracking, wounded it but not killed it. The animal had run, trailing blood and pain, until it crossed paths with Brenna. And somehow, impossibly, it had tried to lead her to something. Or someone. Focus, Brenna muttered to herself. The arrow wasn't important right now. The child was. She pressed on, and 50 yards further she found the spot where the tracks changed direction sharply. The child had heard or seen something that spooked them, sent them, scrambling uphill toward the ridgeline. Bad choice. Going up meant exposure, meant cliffs and drop-offs that were invisible in heavy fog. Brenna's radio was back at the cabin. She'd never carried it on hunts because she'd never needed to. Now that decision felt like criminal stupidity. She was completely alone out here, and if she found this kid, getting them back to safety was going to be entirely on her. She followed the tracks up a slope so steep she had to grab saplings to pull herself forward. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed protest, but she didn't slow down. 63 years old and climbing like a woman half her age because somewhere up ahead was a child who needed her. At the top of the ridge, she found more evidence. A granola bar wrapper, the kind with cartoon characters on it. A few yards away, small handprints on a boulder where the child had stopped to rest. Brenna touched the stone, still had warmth to it, barely, which meant she was getting close. The wind picked up, cutting through her layers. The sky to the west had turned dark grey, storm coming, probably by afternoon. That changed everything. A cold night was survivable if you knew what you were doing. A cold, wet night could kill you in hours. "Hey!" Brenna shouted, her voice echoing off the rocks. "Can you hear me? I'm here to help." Nothing. Just wind and the distant calls of crows. She cupped her hands around her mouth and tried again. "My name is Brenna. I know you're scared, but I can get you home. Just call out so I can find you." Still nothing. Brenna stood there, breathing hard, trying to think like a scared child. Where would you go? What would you do? She scanned the ridgeline and spotted a dark opening in the rocks, about 100 yards to the north, a small cave or overhang, the kind of place that might look like shelter if you were desperate. She scrambled across the rocky terrain, loose stones sliding under her boots. The opening was barely 5 feet high, more of a deep crevice than a proper cave. Brenna knelt down and peered inside. It took a moment for her eyes to adjust to the darkness. Then she saw it, more evidence of the child. A small pile of leaves that might have been a bed. Muddy handprints on the cave wall, child-sized. An empty water bottle. A wrapper from beef jerky. The kid had sheltered here, probably for an hour or two. Smart move, but the fact that they'd left meant they were still mobile, still trying to find their way out. Brenna backed out of the cave and studied the ground outside. Fresh tracks heading east, down the other side of the ridge. She checked her watch, almost 9 a.m. The child had been out here since at least yesterday evening. Based on what she was seeing, that was 12, maybe 14 hours. Long enough for dehydration to set in, for fatigue to cloud judgment, for a twisted ankle to become a serious injury. She followed the tracks down into a hollow filled with mountain laurel, the twisted branches forming a maze that forced her to crouch and push through. Thorns caught at her jacket, her hands got scratched. But she kept going, following the small footprints that showed up in patches of bare earth. Then she heard it, faint, barely audible over the wind, a sound that might have been a voice. Brenna froze, listening hard. There it was again, definitely a voice, high-pitched and weak, coming from somewhere ahead and to the left. "I'm coming," she shouted. "Stay where you are. I'm coming to help." She pushed through the laurel with renewed urgency, no longer caring about the branches whipping her face. The voice came again, louder now, but she couldn't make out words, just the sound of someone crying. Brenna burst through the thicket into a small clearing beside a fast-moving stream. The water was swollen from recent rain, rushing over rocks with enough force to sweep a person off their feet. On the far side of the stream, huddled against the base of a large oak tree, was the child. A girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, wearing jeans and a purple sweatshirt, dark hair plastered to her head from rain or stream water. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears. One of her sneakers was missing, and the foot without it was wrapped in what looked like a torn piece of shirt. Their eyes met across the rushing water. "Help," the girl said, her voice barely carrying over the sound of the stream. "Please help me." Brenna's heart clenched. "It's okay, honey. I've got you. Just stay right there. Don't try to cross the water." She assessed the situation quickly. The stream was only about 15 feet across, but moving fast, Class 2 rapids, enough to knock you down and drag you over rocks. There were stepping stones, but they'd be slippery, treacherous. She could make it across, but getting the kid back over would be harder. First things first. Brenna shrugged off her pack and pulled out the emergency blanket, a thin silver sheet that reflected body heat. She held it up so the girl could see. "I'm coming across, and I'm going to bring you this blanket, okay? How's your foot?" "It hurts," the girl said, fresh tears streaming down her face. "I can't walk on it. Twisted ankle, probably. Maybe broken." Either way, Brenna couldn't expect the kid to navigate the stream crossing on her own. "That's okay. You don't have to walk. I'm going to carry you. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lucy." "Lucy, I'm Brenna. I'm going to get you home safe." "That's a promise." Brenna studied the stream one more time, picking out her route 2 stones that looked stable, then a shallow section near the far bank where she could wade the last few feet. She left her rifle on her pack, not wanting the extra weight or the risk of it swinging and throwing off her balance. She stepped onto the first stone. Cold water immediately soaked through her boots. The stone was slick with algae but held her weight. She stepped to the second stone, arms out for balance, the stream rushing past just inches from her feet. The third stone shifted under her weight. For a heart-stopping moment she thought she was going down, but she caught herself and lunged forward into the shallow section. The water was knee-deep and shockingly cold, but she waded across and climbed onto the far bank. Lucy looked up at her with huge, terrified eyes. Up close, Brenna could see she was shivering violently, her lips tinged blue. Early-stage hypothermia, and it would get worse fast once the sun went down. "Hey there," Brenna said softly, kneeling beside her. "You're doing great, Lucy. You're one tough kid, you know that?" Lucy managed a tiny nod. Brenna wrapped the emergency blanket around the girl's shoulders, then pulled out her water bottle. "Take small sips. Not too much at once." Lucy drank gratefully, her hands shaking so badly Brenna had to help hold the bottle. "Okay," Brenna said, keeping her voice calm and reassuring. "Tell me what happened. How did you end up out here?" "I was hiking with my mom," Lucy said between shivers. "We stopped for lunch, and I saw a deer. I followed it and got lost. I tried to find the trail, but everything looked the same. I called for my mom, but she didn't hear me. Then it got dark, and I was so scared." "Shh, it's okay. You did good. You found shelter. You stayed in one place. That's exactly what you're supposed to do." "My mum must be so worried," Lucy whispered. "I'm sure she is," Brenna said honestly. "But we're going to fix that. First thing, I need to look at your foot." The makeshift bandage was actually Lucy's sock, tied around her ankle. Brenna unwrapped it carefully and examined the joint. Badly swollen, already turning purple. Definitely sprained, possibly fractured. Either way, Lucy wasn't walking out of here. Brenna pulled a first aid kit from her pack and wrapped the ankle properly, stabilizing it as best she could. Then she gave Lucy an energy bar and made her eat half of it, getting some calories and sugar into her system. The wind was picking up and the temperature was dropping. Brenna looked at the sky. That storm was coming faster than she'd thought. They had maybe 2 hours before it hit. "All right, Lucy, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to carry you across this stream, and then we're going to find a safe place to wait out the storm that's coming. Once it passes, I can signal for help and get you back to your mom. Sound good?" Lucy nodded, but her eyes were full of fear. "I know you're scared," Brenna said, meeting those eyes directly. "But I've been living in these mountains for 15 years. I know every rock and every tree. And I promise you, I swear to God, I'm getting you home safe. Do you trust me?" Lucy looked at her for a long moment. Then, with the simple faith of a child, she said, "Yes." Brenna felt something crack in her chest, some wall she'd built so carefully over 15 years of isolation. She blinked back, unexpected, tears, and focused on the task at hand. "Good girl. Now I'm going to carry you piggyback across the stream. Hold on tight to my shoulders and keep your hurt foot away from my body, okay?" She helped Lucy onto her back, feeling the girl's thin arms wrap around her neck, her small body shaking with cold and fear. Brenna adjusted her balance, then started across the stream. The crossing felt like it took forever. Each step was careful, calculated, the weight of the child making everything harder. The water tried to push her downstream. The stones threatened to slip, but she made it 3 stones, then the wade through the shallows, then solid ground. She set Lucy down gently on her pack and wrapped her in the emergency blanket again. Then she looked around, assessing their options. They needed shelter, and they needed it now. The storm was coming, and when it hit, being out in the open could be fatal. Brenna spotted an outcropping of rock about 50 yards to the south. Might provide an overhang, a place to get out of the wind and rain. It would have to do. "One more carry," she told Lucy. "Then we rest. Then we get you home." She hoisted the girl onto her back again and started walking, every step taking them closer to temporary safety, every step taking Brenna further from the isolation she'd chosen and the woman she'd been for 15 years. Whether she was ready or not, she was back in the world now, and someone needed her. The rock overhang wasn't perfect, but it was enough. A natural shelf of granite jutted out about 8 feet, creating a sheltered space underneath that was just tall enough for Brenna to stand if she hunched. The ground was relatively dry, protected from the wind that was now howling through the trees. It would do. Brenna set Lucy down against the back wall and immediately began setting up their temporary camp. She'd done this before, weathered storms in the wilderness, survived nights when the temperature dropped below freezing. But she'd always been alone, responsible only for herself. Having a child depending on her changed everything. "First thing we need is heat," she said, more to herself than to Lucy. She pulled a small tarp from her pack and draped it across the opening, creating a windbreak. Then she gathered dry wood from under nearby trees, oak branches that had fallen months ago, and stayed relatively dry beneath the canopy. Lucy watched with wide eyes, still wrapped in the emergency blanket, still shivering. Her face was pale, except for 2 spots of red on her cheeks. "You know how to make a fire without matches?" Brenna asked as she arranged kindling in a small depression in the rock floor. Lucy shook her head. "I'm going to teach you. Might not be today, but before you go home, you're going to know how." Brenna pulled out waterproof matches from her kit. "But right now, we're going to use the easy way." She struck a match and held it to the dry grass and birch bark she'd shredded. For tinder. The flame caught immediately, spreading quickly to the small twigs she'd arranged above it. Within minutes, she had a proper fire going, the smoke rising and escaping through gaps in the rock above. The heat was immediate and beautiful. Brenna positioned Lucy close enough to feel the warmth, but not so close she'd get burned. The girl's shivering began to ease almost immediately. Better? Brenna asked. Yes, Lucy whispered. Thank you. Brenna pulled out her water bottle and a packet of instant soup from her emergency supplies. She heated water in a small metal cup she always carried, mixed in the soup, and handed it to Lucy. Drink this, slow sips. It'll warm you from the inside. Lucy wrapped both hands around the cup like it was the most precious thing in the world. She sipped carefully, and some color started to return to her face. Brenna sat back against the rock wall and pulled out Tom's compass, turning it over in her hands. The brass was worn smooth from decades of use, the engraving on the back barely visible now. Find your way home. Tom had carried this through Vietnam, through 30 years of hiking and hunting, through every adventure he'd ever had. After he died, Brenna had kept it close. A reminder, a talisman, a piece of him she could hold. That's pretty, Lucy said, watching her. It was my husband's. He gave it to me before he died. My dad's gone too, Lucy said quietly. He left when I was 4. I don't really remember him. Brenna looked at the girl, at this small, brave child who'd survived a night alone in the wilderness. I'm sorry, honey. That must be hard. Lucy shrugged, a gesture that tried to be casual but wasn't quite. Mom says we're better off. She works a lot. She's a nurse. A nurse. Single mother, working hard to make ends meet. Brenna felt an unexpected kinship, though she couldn't quite name why. What about you? Lucy asked. Do you have kids? The question hit harder than it should have. Brenna was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. I do. A son and a daughter, but I don't see them anymore. Why not? Because I was a coward. Because I let grief turn me into someone I didn't recognize. Because it was easier to run away than to face what I'd lost. It's complicated, Brenna said finally. Lucy seemed to accept this. She finished the soup and handed the cup back. Are you going to teach me about the fire? Brenna smiled despite herself. Not today. Today you rest. But I'll tell you this, if you're ever lost out here again, the most important thing is to stay calm. Don't run. Find shelter. Stay warm. Someone will always come looking. You came looking, Lucy said. I did. How did you find me? Brenna thought about the doe, about that impossible cry, about the way the animal had led her straight to the jacket. She didn't understand it and probably never would. A deer showed me the way. I know that sounds strange. I saw a deer, Lucy said suddenly, animated. Yesterday, when I first got lost, it had an arrow in its side. It was hurt. I tried to help it, but it ran away. Brenna's chest tightened. The same deer. It had to be. Wounded, in pain, and somehow it had found a way to bring help to a lost child. Nature worked in ways that didn't always make sense, but sometimes, very rarely, it worked in ways that felt almost like grace. That deer saved your life, Brenna said softly. Lucy considered this, then nodded solemnly. I hope it's okay. Me too, honey. The wind picked up outside their shelter, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Within minutes it was a downpour, sheets of water visible beyond their tarp windbreak. The temperature dropped noticeably. Brenna added more wood to the fire and pulled out another emergency blanket for herself. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain, watching the fire. Brenna found herself studying Lucy, the way she held herself, the shape of her face, something familiar in her expressions that Brenna couldn't quite place. Probably just that all children reminded you of your own when they were that age. Sophie had been 8 once, fearless and full of questions, always wanting to explore and understand. God, where had the time gone? Tell me about your mom, Brenna said. What's she like? Lucy's face lit up. She's really smart and brave. She works in the emergency room, so she sees really sick people all the time. She says helping people is the most important thing you can do. She paused, then added, she gets sad sometimes, though, especially when she talks about her mom. Her mom? My grandma. Mom says they had a fight a long time ago and now they don't talk. Mom says it's her biggest regret. Lucy picked at the emergency blanket. I wish I could meet her. My grandma, I mean. Mom says she lives in the mountains, just like you. Brenna felt like the ground had shifted beneath her. It was just a coincidence. Lots of people lived in mountains. Lots of families had estrangements. It didn't mean, what's your mum's name? Brenna heard herself ask. Sophie. Sophie Hartwell. That's her married name, though. Her real last name was Mott. The world stopped. Everything stopped. Brenna couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at this child. This beautiful, brave child who had her daughter's eyes, who had her daughter's last name, who was her granddaughter. Are you okay? Lucy asked, concerned. Brenna forced herself to nod, forced herself to breathe. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking, and it had nothing to do with the cold. Sophie, her Sophie, had come hiking in these mountains, the mountains where her mother lived in self-imposed exile, had brought her daughter, Brenna's granddaughter, to these woods. And through some impossible twist of fate, through the cry of a wounded deer and a series of choices that still didn't make sense, Brenna had found her. I'm okay, she managed to say. Just cold, that's all. But she wasn't okay. She was the furthest thing from okay. Because sitting 3 feet away from her was the grandchild she'd never met, the family she'd walked away from, living proof of everything she'd sacrificed in the name of grief and pride. Lucy didn't know, had no idea who Brenna really was, and Brenna couldn't tell her, not yet. Not until she figured out what this meant, what she was supposed to do with this impossible gift that the universe had somehow dropped in her lap. The rain pounded down outside, the fire crackled and popped, and Brenna sat there, staring at her granddaughter, feeling 15 years of carefully constructed walls crumbling to dust around her. Tell me more about your mum, she said, her voice rough with emotion she couldn't quite hide. Tell me everything. And Lucy, trusting and innocent and completely unaware of the truth, began to talk. About Sophie's long shifts at the hospital, about movie nights, and homemade pizza, about the apartment they shared in a town called Ridgemont, about how hard Sophie worked to make sure Lucy had everything she needed, about how sometimes, late at night when she thought Lucy was asleep, Sophie would look at an old photograph and cry. Brenna listened to every word, committing it all to memory, learning about the life her daughter had built without her, learning about the woman Sophie had become, learning about the family she'd missed, the moments she'd thrown away, the love she'd been too broken to accept. And with every word Lucy spoke, Brenna felt something in her chest breaking open, not in pain this time, but in something that felt almost like hope. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside their small shelter, warmed by fire and the presence of each other, two people who should have been strangers found themselves becoming something else, even if only one of them knew what that something was. The rain didn't let up. If anything, it got worse, a proper mountain storm that would last hours, turning trails into streams and making any attempt to move through the forest dangerous at best, suicidal at worst. Brenna knew they were stuck here until it passed. There was nothing to do but wait, tend the fire, and keep Lucy warm and calm. But Brenna's mind was racing, tripping over itself with the enormity of what she now knew. This was Sophie's daughter, her granddaughter. 12 years old, no, wait. Lucy had said she was 8, which meant Sophie had been pregnant when she came to the cabin that last time, had given birth alone, or with friends, or with the man who would become her ex-husband, had raised this beautiful child without her mother's help, without Brenna's support, without any of the wisdom or love Brenna could have offered, should have offered. The guilt was crushing. 15 years ago, drowning in grief, Brenna had convinced herself she was protecting her children by staying away, that they were better off, without her broken, angry presence in their lives. Now, looking at Lucy, she saw the truth with painful clarity. She hadn't been protecting anyone. She'd been running, hiding, choosing the easier pain of isolation over the harder work of healing. You got quiet, Lucy said, pulling Brenna from her thoughts. Sorry, just thinking. About what? How to tell you who I am, how to explain to your mother why I wasn't there, how to ask for forgiveness I don't deserve. About getting you home safe, Brenna said instead. Lucy nodded, accepting this. She shifted closer to the fire, wincing as she moved her injured ankle. How long until the storm stops? Few hours, probably. Mountain storms move fast, but they hit hard. Brenna checked her watch. Almost 11. We'll wait it out, then I'll signal for help. You'll be back with your mom before dark. She's probably freaking out. I'm sure she is, but she's also probably with search and rescue, working with them to find you. Your mom's a nurse. She knows how to stay calm in emergencies. She does, Lucy agreed, then quieter. I hope she's not too mad at me. Mad at you? Honey, she's not going to be mad. She's going to be relieved. And grateful. And so happy you're safe. I shouldn't have followed the deer. She told me to stay close. Brenna reached over and squeezed Lucy's hand gently. You made a mistake. All kids do. Hell, all people do. What matters is you survived. You were smart enough to find shelter, brave enough to keep going. Your mum is going to be proud of you. Lucy looked up at her, eyes shining with unshed tears. You think so? I know so. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Lucy said, Can I ask you something? Of course. Why don't you see your kids anymore? Did you have a fight like my mum and her mum? The question was so innocent, so direct. Lucy had no idea she was asking about herself, about her own family. Brenna took a slow breath, choosing her words carefully. When my husband died, I didn't handle it well. I was so sad, so angry at the world, that I pushed everyone away. My son, my daughter. I told myself it was better that way, that they didn't need to deal with me being broken. But they probably wanted to help you, Lucy said with the simple wisdom of children. They did. And I wouldn't let them. That's my biggest regret. Brenna stared into the fire, seeing Tom's face in the flames. Your mum is right to regret losing touch with her mother. Because family, real family, that's the only thing that matters in the end. Not the mountains, not the quiet, not the pride. Just the people who love you. Then why don't you call them? Your kids? Because I don't know if they'd want to hear from me. It's been 15 years. That's a long time to be gone. I think they would, Lucy said with certainty. If my mom could talk to her mum again, she would in a second. She told me that once. Brenna's throat tightened. She couldn't speak for a moment, couldn't trust her voice. Finally she managed, That's good to know. Lucy pulled something from her pocket. A small beaded bracelet, handmade, the threads soaked and muddy but still intact. My mom made this for me. Want to see? Brenna took the bracelet carefully, turning it over in her hands. The weaving pattern was familiar, a friendship bracelet technique she'd taught Sophie when she was 12 years old. The memory hit her like a physical blow. Sitting on the cabin porch on a summer afternoon, Sophie's small hands struggling with the threads, Brenna patiently showing her the pattern over and over until she got it right. It's beautiful, Brenna said, her voice rough. She makes them all the time. Says her mum taught her when she was little. Lucy took the bracelet back and slipped it on her wrist. I'm going to teach my kids someday too. Keep the tradition going. Keep the tradition going. A tradition Brenna had started, that Sophie had preserved, that Lucy would pass down. Brenna felt something shift in her chest, not breaking this time, but opening. A door she'd locked years ago, slowly creaking open to let light in. That's a wonderful idea, Brenna said. The rain drummed on, relentless and loud. Brenna added more wood to the fire and pulled out energy bars for both of them. They ate slowly, conserving supplies, but making sure Lucy got enough calories to fight off the cold. Tell me about living up here, Lucy said between bites. Do you get lonely? The honest answer was yes. Every single day. But admitting that meant admitting she'd been wrong. that the life she'd chosen was a punishment she'd inflicted on herself rather than the refuge she'd pretended it was. "Sometimes," Brenna said carefully, "but I have the forest, the animals, the seasons changing. There's a kind of peace in that. But no people. No people. That sounds really lonely," Lucy said with devastating honesty. Brenna couldn't argue. "It is. I think I forgot that for a while, or maybe I just got good at pretending it wasn't. You should call your kids," Lucy said again, with that childlike persistence that wouldn't let an idea go. "Even if it's scary, even if you think they might be mad, because what if they're not? What if they've been waiting for you to call? What if they have been? What if Sophie, what if all this time Brenna had to look away, blinking hard against tears she refused to shed? Not yet. Not while Lucy was watching, not while she still had to be strong and capable and in control. "Maybe I will," she said softly, "after we get you home. Promise?" Brenna looked at her granddaughter, at this brave, compassionate, wise beyond her years child she'd never known existed. "Promise." Lucy smiled, satisfied with this answer. She shifted closer to Brenna, leaning against her shoulder with unconscious trust. "You're really nice. I'm glad you found me." Brenna put her arm around Lucy, careful not to jostle her injured ankle. The girl was small and warm and alive, and having her this close felt like holding every mistake and regret Brenna had ever made, transformed somehow into a second chance she didn't deserve, but desperately wanted. "I'm glad too, sweetheart." They sat like that for a long time, listening to the rain, watching the fire, two pieces of the same family puzzle who didn't know they fit together yet. Outside, the storm raged through the forest. But here, in this small shelter, something impossible was happening. Brenna Mott, hermit, recluse, woman who'd chosen mountains over family, was remembering what it felt like to be needed, to matter, to love. And Lucy, lost, injured, scared, was learning that sometimes the people who save you are exactly the people you've been missing your whole life, even if you didn't know they existed. The rain began to ease around 1 o'clock. The downpour became a drizzle, then stopped altogether. Weak sunlight broke through the clouds, painting the wet forest in shades of gold and green. Steam rose from the ground as the temperature climbed. "Storm's over," Brenna said. "Time to get you home." Lucy looked up at her, suddenly anxious. "Will I see you again? After today?" Brenna thought about the impossible answer to that question. "Yes, I promise you will." She helped Lucy to her feet, supporting her weight, and together they emerged from the shelter into the clean-washed world. The forest smelled like rain and earth and new beginnings. Brenna pulled out her rifle and chambered 3 rounds. Then she aimed at the sky and fired 3 times in quick succession, the universal signal for distress, for help needed, for someone waiting to be found. The shots echoed through the mountains, carrying across the valley, reaching toward Ridgemont and the search teams that were surely combing these woods. Somewhere out there, Sophie was listening. Somewhere out there, Brenna's. The daughter was about to learn that her mother, after 15 years of silence, had just saved her daughter's life, and nothing would ever be the same again. The response came faster than Brenna expected. Within 20 minutes, she heard the distant sound of a helicopter, the thump of rotors cutting through the mountain air. She fired 3 more shots, guiding them toward her position. The helicopter circled overhead, too high to land in the dense forest, but close enough to confirm they'd been spotted. A voice crackled through a loudspeaker, barely audible over the rotor noise. "Stay where you are. Ground team is en route. 15 minutes. Brenna waved her arms in acknowledgement. The helicopter banked away, heading back toward the staging area to guide the rescue team. "They're coming," Lucy said, relief and nervousness mixing in her voice. "They are." Brenna kept her own voice steady, but inside she was anything but calm. In 15 minutes, maybe 20, Sophie would be here. The daughter she'd abandoned, the woman she'd last seen 12 years ago when she'd turned her away from this very mountain. What would she say? What could she possibly say that would make any of this right? They waited at the edge of the clearing, Lucy sitting on a fallen log with her injured ankle elevated, Brenna standing watch. The forest was quiet except for the drip of water from leaves and the distant calls of birds, resuming their routines after the storm. "Are you scared?" Lucy asked suddenly. "Scared of what?" "Of seeing your daughter again. You look scared." Brenna almost laughed at how transparent she apparently was. "Yeah, honey. I'm terrified." "Don't be. I bet she misses you." "I hope so, but I wouldn't blame her if she hated me." Lucy shook her head with the confidence of someone too young to understand how deeply hurt could scar. Mums don't hate their kids, and kids don't really hate their mums. Not really. Not deep down. Brenna wanted to believe that, needed to believe it. But 15 years was a long time to carry anger and resentment. Sophie had every right to both. The sound of voices reached them first, multiple people moving through the forest, calling out coordinates and locations. Then figures appeared through the trees, 2 paramedics in bright orange gear, followed by 3 search and rescue volunteers, and behind them, Sophie. Brenna's breath caught. Her daughter was 38 now, no longer the 26-year-old who'd stood on her porch begging for reconciliation. Her hair was shorter, pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore hiking boots and gear that looked well used. But her face, God, her face was the same. Tom's eyes, Brenna's jawline, something uniquely her own that had always made her beautiful. And right now, that face was painted with desperate fear and exhausted hope. "Lucy!" Sophie broke from the group and ran, stumbling over roots and rocks, in her desperation to reach her daughter. Lucy tried to stand, winced, and fell back. "Mom!" Sophie crashed to her knees beside the log, her hands running over Lucy's face, her arms, checking for injuries with the practiced efficiency of a nurse and the frantic love of a mother. "Oh, God! Oh, thank God! You're okay. You're really okay." "I'm fine, Mum. I hurt my ankle, but I'm fine. This Lady Brenna, she found me. She saved me." Sophie looked up then, her eyes meeting Brenna's across 10 feet of forest floor. The moment stretched, both of them frozen. Recognition dawned slowly on Sophie's face, confusion first, then disbelief, then shock so complete she couldn't seem to process it. "Mom?" she whispered. Brenna couldn't speak, could barely breathe. She managed a small nod. Sophie's face crumpled. She pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks, her whole body shaking with emotion. Brenna couldn't begin to interpret. Relief? Anger? Both? The paramedics moved in, breaking the moment. They began examining Lucy, asking questions, checking vital signs. One of them, a young man with kind eyes, looked at Brenna. "You kept her warm and dry?" "Yes. Small fire, emergency blanket, hot food and water. You probably saved her life. Another night out here with that storm, and we'd be having a very different conversation." He turned to Sophie. "Your daughter's going to be fine, ma'am. Sprained ankle, mild hypothermia that's already resolving, some dehydration, but she's tough. She's going to be okay." Sophie nodded, unable to speak, still holding Lucy like she might disappear if she let go. The other paramedic pulled out a sat phone and made a call, reporting the successful recovery. They strapped Lucy's ankle more securely and prepared a stretcher. The terrain was too rough to carry her out on foot. One of the rescue volunteers, a weathered man in his 50s, approached Brenna. "You're the one who fired the signal shots?" "Yes. You live up here?" "I do. About 3 miles north." He studied her with curiosity. "You must be the woman people talk about, the hermit on the mountain." Brenna didn't confirm or deny. She was watching Sophie, who was watching Lucy get settled on the stretcher, who kept looking back at Brenna with wide, wondering eyes. "Well, whatever else you are, you're a hero today," the volunteer said. "That little girl's lucky you were out here." A hero? Brenna almost laughed at the absurdity. She wasn't a hero. She was a coward who'd gotten extraordinarily lucky. If that deer hadn't cried out, if she'd taken the shot instead of investigating, if any one of 100 small moments had gone differently, Lucy would have died out here, and Brenna would never have known she'd failed to save her own granddaughter. The rescue team began the careful process of carrying Lucy out. Sophie walked beside the stretcher, never letting go of her daughter's hand. But every few steps, she looked back at Brenna. Finally, she stopped, turned, walked back. They stood facing each other for the first time in 12 years, close enough to touch, an impossible gulf between them. "Why?" Sophie's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why are you here? Of all the people in these mountains, why did it have to be you who found her?" "I don't know," Brenna said honestly. "Luck. Fate. God's sense of humor. I don't know. You've been up here all this time? 3 miles from where I go hiking? Where I brought my daughter? I didn't know. I didn't know you came here. I didn't know about her, about Lucy. I swear to God, Sophie, I didn't know." Sophie's face twisted with pain. "You would have known if you'd answered any of my letters, any of my calls, if you'd opened the door 12 years ago when I stood on your porch and begged. I know. You have a granddaughter. Her name is Lucy Marie. She's 8 years old. She loves art and swimming, and she wants to be a veterinarian. And she has spent her entire life asking about you, wondering why her grandmother doesn't love her." The words hit like bullets. Brenna's legs nearly gave out. "Sophie, she thinks there's something wrong with her, that she's not good enough for you to want to know her. That's what I've had to live with. Watching my daughter think she's not worthy of love because her grandmother chose mountains over family. That's not I never meant." Brenna couldn't finish. There were no words adequate to this moment. "What did you mean then?" Sophie's voice cracked. "When you told me I was better off without you, when you said you had nothing left to give, what the hell did you mean? I meant I was broken. I meant I was drowning. I meant I couldn't be what you needed because I didn't know how to be anything except lost. So you stayed lost. For 15 years. Yes." Sophie wiped her eyes roughly. "I should hate you. I've tried to hate you. But standing here, knowing you saved Lucy's life, knowing that somehow impossibly you were the one who found her, I don't know what to feel anymore." "You should hate me," Brenna said. "I deserve it. Maybe. But Lucy doesn't think so. She talked about you the whole way down, about how brave you are, how kind, how you promised to teach her survival skills." Sophie's voice broke. "She has no idea who you really are. And I don't know whether to tell her or protect her from the truth that her grandmother is the woman who abandoned us." "Sophie." "Mom." One of the paramedics called back. "We need to get moving. There's an ambulance waiting at the trailhead." Sophie looked toward where Lucy was being carried away, then back at Brenna. "I have to go. Lucy needs me." "I know. Go, take care of her." Sophie started to turn away, then stopped. When she spoke again, her voice was different, still angry, still hurt, but something else underneath, something that might have been hope. "She wants to see you again, Lucy. She made me promise to bring her back to thank you properly." Sophie met Brenna's eyes. "I don't know if I can watch her fall in love with someone who's just going to disappear again. I won't disappear. You did before, I know, and I can't take that back. But I'm asking, begging for a chance to do better. Not for me, for Lucy. She deserves better than what I gave you." Sophie stared at her for a long moment. Then, so quietly, Brenna almost missed it. "We all deserved better." She walked away then, following the rescue team through the forest, leaving Brenna standing alone in the clearing with her rifle and her guilt, and the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, she'd been given a second chance she had no idea how to take. The forest closed in around her, familiar and isolating. But it felt different now, less like sanctuary and more like prison, because somewhere down that mountain was a family she'd thrown away, and for the first time in 15 years, Brenna wanted desperately to find her, way back to them, if they'd let her, if she was brave enough to try. Brenna walked back to her cabin in a daze. her mind replaying the look on Sophie's face over and over. The hurt, the anger, the confusion, all of it deserved, all of it earned through 15 years of stubborn isolation and self-imposed exile. The cabin felt different when she reached it. Smaller, somehow. Emptier. The walls that had seemed like protection now felt like prison bars. She set her rifle by the door and sank into the worn armchair by the stove, Tom's compass still in her pocket, pressing against her hip like an accusation. Find your way home. She'd thought home was here. This cabin, these mountains, this solitary life where no one could hurt her because no one could reach her. But Lucy's words kept echoing in her head. That sounds really lonely. It was lonely. God, it was so lonely she'd forgotten what it felt like not to be. Brenna pulled out her satellite phone, the one she kept charged for. Emergencies, but never used. She had numbers stored in it. Michael's cell. Sophie's cell. Both probably disconnected by now. Both probably changed years ago when they finally accepted she was never going to call. She stared at Sophie's number for a full 10 minutes before she put the phone away. Not yet. She needed to think. Needed to figure out what she could possibly say that wouldn't make things worse. The days that followed were strange. Brenna went through her normal routines, tending her garden, hunting, chopping wood, preparing for winter, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about Lucy's face, Sophie's tears, the impossible coincidence that had brought them all together. She wondered how Lucy was healing, whether her ankle was better, whether she'd told her friends about being lost in the mountains, whether she'd told them about the woman who saved her. 3 days after the rescue, Brenna made the drive into Ridgemont. She told herself it was just for supplies, the monthly trip she always made. But she knew she was lying. She was looking for information, for signs of Sophie and Lucy, for some connection to the family she'd discovered she still had. The town was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Brenna usually avoided conversation, but today she lingered in the general store, listening to the gossip. "Did you hear about the Henderson girl?" An older woman was saying to the clerk. "Got lost up on Eagle Ridge, spent a whole night out there. I heard. Must have been terrifying for the family. The mother's that nurse at County General. Sophie something. Works the ER. Oh, I know Sophie. Sweet woman. Raising that girl all on her own after her divorce." Brenna's hands tightened on her shopping basket. She moved closer, pretending to examine canned goods. "Well, apparently some woman who lives up in the mountains found the little girl," the older woman continued. "Kept her safe through that storm Lucky. They say the child would have died otherwise." "Lucky," the clerk said. "Very lucky. Sophie brought her daughter by yesterday to say thank you, but the woman Brenna, I think her name was, wasn't home, or didn't answer the door. Probably doesn't like visitors." Brenna's heart skipped. Sophie had come to the cabin, brought Lucy. She'd missed them. She paid for her supplies quickly and drove back up the mountain faster than was safe, the truck bouncing over ruts and rocks. But when she reached the cabin, there was no sign anyone had been there. No note, no footprints in the dirt, nothing. Had they come? Had Sophie really brought Lucy? Or was it just town gossip getting details wrong? Brenna spent that evening on the porch, watching the road, hoping to see headlights cutting through the dusk. But none came. The next morning, she found something she'd missed in the dark. A small bundle on the porch step, wrapped in cloth. Inside was a drawing child's artwork on notebook. Paper. It showed a mountain with a tiny cabin, a woman with dark hair holding a rifle, and a smiling stick-figure girl. At the bottom, in careful letters, "Thank you for saving me. Love, Lucy." Brenna's vision blurred. She sat down hard on the porch step, clutching the drawing like it was the most precious thing she'd ever held. They had come. Lucy had come. And Brenna had been in town, avoiding the very connection she desperately wanted. Under the drawing was a note in adult handwriting. Sophie's handwriting. Brenna recognized it even after all these years. "Lucy wanted to thank you in person. We waited for 2 hours. She made you a bracelet, but I think she dropped it on the trail back to the car. She cried the whole way home because she wanted to see you again. I don't know what you want, Mum. I don't know if you're hiding from us or if you just weren't home, but my daughter loves you. She doesn't know you're her grandmother, and I haven't told her. I don't know if I should. I don't know if you want me to. I don't know anything anymore. If you want to see her again, you know where we live. Ridgemont. The apartment above the pharmacy on Main Street. We're there most evenings. The choice is yours. It's always been yours. Sophie. The words were measured, careful, but Brenna could read the pain between the lines. Sophie was offering an opening, but she was terrified. Terrified that Brenna would disappear again. Terrified that Lucy would get hurt. Terrified of hope. Brenna sat on that porch for hours, reading and rereading the note, studying Lucy's drawing. Her granddaughter had drawn her as a hero, strong and capable and good. Lucy didn't know the truth. Didn't know that Brenna had abandoned her mother, had chosen solitude over family, had spent 15 years being exactly the kind of person who didn't deserve a second chance. But Lucy was offering one anyway. And through Lucy, so was Sophie. The question was whether Brenna was brave enough to take it. She thought about Tom, about what he would say if he could see her now. He'd always been braver than her, more willing to face hard truths and uncomfortable emotions. He would have told her to stop hiding, to go to them, to apologize and mean it, and spend however much time she had left trying to earn back what she'd thrown away. "I'm scared," she said out loud to the empty porch, to the ghost of her husband, to the mountains that couldn't answer. "I don't know how to do this." But she knew she had to try. The next morning, Brenna did something she hadn't done in 15 years. She cleaned herself up properly, showered, washed her hair, put on clothes that weren't stained or worn. She looked at herself in the small mirror above her dresser and barely recognized the woman staring back. 63 years old, lines around her eyes and mouth, hair gone mostly grey. When had that happened? She looked like what she was, a woman who'd spent 15 years running from life and had the scars to prove it, but maybe it wasn't too late to change that. She packed a small bag, the drawing, the note, a few things she thought Lucy might like. A book on wilderness survival she'd written notes in over the years, a small carved deer Tom had made decades ago. The photograph from her drawer, the one showing their family whole and happy. Then she got in her truck and started the long drive down the mountain toward Ridgemont, toward her daughter, toward her granddaughter, toward the terrifying possibility of redemption. The drive took 45 minutes, every one of them filled with doubt. What if Sophie changed her mind? What if Lucy decided she didn't want to see the strange mountain woman again? What if Brenna said the wrong thing, did the wrong thing, ruined this fragile chance before it even started? But she kept driving. The apartment above the pharmacy was easy to find. Brenna parked across the street and sat in her truck, gathering courage. Through the lit window, she could see movement, shadows, the life her daughter had built without her. She was about to open the truck door when the apartment door opened and Lucy came out, supported by crutches, her ankles still wrapped. Sophie was beside her, helping her navigate the stairs. They were going somewhere. And Brenna had two choices. She could drive away, retreat back to her mountain, keep hiding, or she could get out of the truck and face the consequences of 15 years of cowardice. She watched Lucy laugh at something Sophie said, watched Sophie's hand rest protectively on her daughter's shoulder, watched the easy affection between them, the bond that had survived everything, including Brenna's abandonment. She thought about Tom's compass. Find your way home. Maybe home wasn't the cabin. Maybe it never had been. Brenna opened the truck door and stepped out into the cool evening air. Her legs felt shaky, her heart pounded. But she walked across the street toward her daughter and granddaughter, toward the family she'd lost, toward whatever came next. Lucy saw her first, her face lit up with pure joy. "Brenna! Mom! Look, it's Brenna!" Sophie turned, her expression complex: surprise, fear, hope, anger, all warring for dominance. She didn't say anything, just stood there, holding Lucy steady, waiting to see what Brenna would do. Brenna stopped a few feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to give them space. "Hi," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "I got your note. I got Lucy's drawing. It's beautiful. Thank you." "You came," Lucy said, beaming. "I wanted to see you again, but you weren't home and I was so sad." "I'm sorry. I was in town. I wish I'd been there." Brenna looked at Sophie. "Can we talk? Please. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway." Sophie's jaw tightened. She looked down at Lucy, then back at Brenna. "Lucy needs to get to her art class. I was just taking her. I can wait, or I can drive you if you want, if that's okay." The offer hung in the air. Sophie could refuse, could tell Brenna to leave and never come back, could protect Lucy from the truth and the pain of another abandonment. But she didn't. "Okay," Sophie said finally. "You can drive us, but Lucy and I need to talk first. Give us a minute." Brenna nodded and stepped back, watching as Sophie knelt beside Lucy and spoke to her in low tones. Lucy kept looking over at Brenna, her face serious, listening to whatever her mother was telling her. Finally, Lucy nodded. Sophie helped her over to Brenna's truck. "Lucy knows," Sophie said quietly. "I told her who you really are. She deserved to know the truth." Brenna's heart stopped. "And?" Lucy looked up at her with those familiar eyes, Sophie's eyes, Brenna's eyes, generations of family written in their depths. "And I'm really, really glad you're my grandma," Lucy said simply. Brenna's knees nearly buckled. She reached out to steady herself on the truck, blinking hard against tears that threatened to overwhelm her. "I'm really, really glad too," she managed to whisper. Sophie opened the truck door and helped Lucy inside. Then she climbed in herself, sitting between her mother and her daughter, a bridge between past and future. Brenna got behind the wheel, her hands shaking, and started the engine. She didn't know where this would lead. Didn't know if Sophie would ever forgive her, if Lucy would understand when she was old enough to know the full truth, if they could build something real from the ruins of what had been lost. But for the first time in 15 years, Brenna Mott was driving toward family instead of away from it. And that, somehow, felt like coming home. They drove in tense silence to the community center where Lucy's art class met. Brenna kept her eyes on the road, hyper-aware of Sophie beside her, of Lucy's presence between them. The girl chattered nervously, talking about her art projects and her friends, and how excited she was that her grandmother was real and not just someone from stories. "Mom always showed me pictures," Lucy said, pulling something from her pocket. She kept them, even though she was sad. She held up a small locket, silver and worn. Brenna recognized it immediately. She'd given it to Sophie on her 16th birthday. But when Lucy opened it, Brenna saw something that made her breath catch. On one side was a photo of Sophie as a child, maybe 7 years old. Pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, and eyes full of mischief. Brenna remembered taking that photo, remembered that summer day like it was yesterday. On the other side was a photo of Lucy at about the same age, the resemblance so striking it was almost eerie. "See?" Lucy said. "Mom says we look the same. She says I have your eyes too." Brenna pulled into the community center parking lot and put the truck in park, her hands trembling on the wheel. She couldn't stop staring at the locket, at the evidence of continuity, of family, of the generations she'd tried to cut herself off from. "Where did you get that?" Brenna asked Sophie, her voice barely above a whisper. "You gave it to me," Sophie said quietly, "for my 16th birthday. You said it was supposed to hold pictures of the people I loved most. I put my childhood photo in it years ago, added Lucy's last year when she turned 8, the same age I was in my photo. But I thought you came to the cabin when you were pregnant," you said. Brenna stopped, confused. Sophie's expression was complicated, painful. "Lucy isn't my only child, Mum." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. What? I had a daughter when I came to your cabin 12 years ago. Emma. She was born 6 months after that visit. Sophie's voice cracked. I brought her to meet you when she was 2. You weren't home, or you hid. I tried 3 more times. You never answered the door. Brenna felt like the ground had dropped away beneath her. I didn't know. I never saw. I know you didn't, because you were so good at hiding, so determined to stay lost. Sophie wiped her eyes roughly. Emma is 12 now. She lives with her father, my ex-husband, in Charlotte. He got custody 2 years ago when my work schedule got too demanding. I see her every other weekend, holidays. She's a good kid, smart, loves horses. Has your stubborn streak. Doesn't know she has a grandmother on my side because I was too ashamed to explain why my mother chose not to be part of our lives. So I just didn't tell her. Let her think you were dead, basically. Easier than the truth. Lucy was looking between them, confused by the sudden tension. Mom, what's wrong? Nothing, baby. Sophie forced a smile. Go on inside. Mrs. Patterson's waiting. But we'll be right here when you're done. Promise. Sophie helped Lucy out of the truck and watched as she made her slow way up the truck. Community center steps, looking back twice with worried eyes. When Lucy disappeared inside, Sophie turned to Brenna. You want to know the worst part? When Lucy got lost, when I thought I might lose her, the first thing I thought was, I should call my mother. Even after 15 years, even after everything, I still wanted my mom. Brenna couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. 2 granddaughters. She'd missed not one childhood but 2. Not one set of first words and first steps and birthdays and school plays but 2. The enormity of it crushed her. Why didn't you tell me? She finally managed. Why didn't you when I found Lucy? Why didn't you say, because I was in shock? Because I couldn't process that the woman who saved my daughter was the same woman who abandoned me? Because I'm still so angry at you I can barely think straight. Sophie's voice rose, then fell. And because I was terrified that if you knew, you'd disappear again, at least with Lucy knowing you as just the woman who saved her. I could control the damage if you decided we weren't worth the effort. Sophie, do you have any idea what it was like? Being pregnant, alone, terrified, and having my own mother tell me she had nothing left to give? Do you know what that did to me? I can't. There's no excuse. No, there isn't. Sophie's hands were shaking. I named Emma after Grandma, your mother, because she was there for me when you weren't. She helped me through the pregnancy, helped me with Lucy when she was born. She died 6 years ago, and I never got to tell you because you cut yourself off from everyone. Brenna's mother. Dead. 6 years gone. One more thing she'd missed. One more funeral she hadn't attended. One more piece of family she'd let slip away. I didn't know, Brenna said helplessly. I didn't know any of it. Because you didn't want to know. That's the point, Mom. You chose not to know. You chose the mountains over us. Over me, over your grandchildren, over everything. They sat in silence, the truck cab feeling too small for the weight of 15 years of pain and regret. I can't fix this, Brenna said finally. I know that. I can't go back and change what I did. Can't give you back the years I stole from us. But I want God, Sophie. I want to try. I want to know Emma. I want to know Lucy better. I want to be part of your lives if you'll let me. Why now? Sophie demanded. What changed? Just because you happened to find Lucy? If that deer hadn't led you to her, would you still be up on your mountain, pretending we don't exist? It was a fair question. An impossible question. I don't know, Brenna admitted. Maybe. Probably. I got stuck, Sophie. After your father died, I got so stuck in grief I couldn't see a way out. And the longer I stayed stuck, the harder it got to move. Until I convinced myself stuck was where I belonged. That's not good enough. I know it's not. But it's the truth. Sophie stared out the windshield at the community center. at the place where her daughter was inside, doing normal kid things while her life quietly transformed. Lucy wants you in her life. She's already attached to you. I can see it. And I won't break her heart by taking you away from her, but Emma is different. Emma doesn't know you, and I need to figure out if introducing you is going to help or hurt her. I understand. Do you? Because Emma's been through enough. The divorce was hard on her. Living with her dad, only seeing me on weekends, she struggles with feeling abandoned. And I can't bring her a grandmother who might disappear the moment things get difficult. I won't disappear. You say that, but you said a lot of things 15 years ago too. You said you'd be there for me. You said you loved me. You said family was everything. Then Dad died, and suddenly none of that mattered. The accusations hit like physical blows, but Brenna took them, deserved them. You're right. I failed you. I failed your father's memory. I failed myself, and I'm sorrier than you can possibly imagine, but I'm here now, and I'm asking, begging for a chance to prove I mean it this time. Sophie was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, but somehow more broken. Do you know what Lucy said when I told her you were her grandmother? She said, "Does this mean she'll teach me to make bracelets like you do? Like great-grandma taught you?" And I realized she wants the tradition. She wants the connection to family history. She wants what I wanted when I was her age. I want that too. But wanting isn't enough, Mum. I wanted you at my wedding. I wanted you there when Emma was born. I wanted you there when Lucy was born. I wanted you at Christmas and birthdays and all the normal, boring, everyday moments that make up a life. Wanting doesn't fix 15 years of absence. I know. So what do we do now? It was the question Brenna had. I've been asking herself since the moment she recognized Sophie's face. She didn't have a good answer. Didn't have a plan or a roadmap for how to rebuild something so thoroughly destroyed. We start small, she said finally. I spend time with Lucy. Let her get to know me. Let you see that I'm serious. And when, if you decide I've earned it, I meet Emma, and we go from there. One day at a time. Sophie turned to look at her directly for the first time since they'd gotten in the truck. One day at a time means you don't get to disappear when it gets hard. It means you show up even when it's uncomfortable. It means you put us first for once. I will. I promise. Don't promise, just do it. Prove it. The community center doors opened and Lucy emerged, waving a piece of paper triumphantly. She made her way carefully down the steps, her face glowing with pride. I made something for you, she called to Brenna. Want to see? Brenna looked at Sophie, asking permission. Sophie hesitated, then nodded. They got out of the truck and met Lucy at the bottom of the steps. She held up her artwork, a painting of mountains at sunset, purple and gold, and breathtaking in its childlike simplicity. At the bottom, she'd written, "For Grandma Brenna. It's beautiful," Brenna said, her voice thick. "I'm going to hang it in my cabin where I can see it every day. Really, really. It's the best gift anyone's ever given me." Lucy beamed. Then, without warning, she wrapped her arms around Brenna's waist in a fierce hug. Brenna froze for a moment, overwhelmed, then carefully hugged her back, this granddaughter she barely knew but already loved desperately. Over Lucy's head, Brenna met Sophie's eyes. Her daughter was crying silently, watching them, her expression a mixture of pain and hope and fear. This was real now. This was happening. And there was no going back. Brenna had spent 15 years trying to escape the pain of loss. But standing here, holding her, granddaughter, seeing her daughter's tears, she understood something fundamental. The only way through pain was through it. Not around it, not away from it, but straight through the fire and out the other side. She'd run for 15 years. It was time to stop running and start facing what she'd lost. And maybe, if she was very lucky and worked very hard, she could start building something new from the ruins. The weeks that followed were the hardest and most rewarding of Brenna's life. She came down from the mountain 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, to spend time with Lucy. They started small: lunch at the diner in town, walks around the park when Lucy's ankle healed enough, art projects at Sophie's apartment, while Sophie worked her shifts at the hospital. Lucy was easy to love. She was curious and funny and remarkably forgiving for an 8-year-old who'd learned her grandmother existed only a few weeks ago. She asked endless questions about the mountains, about survival skills, about what it was like to live alone. Brenna answered as honestly as she could, editing out the loneliness and the regret, but trying to give Lucy a true picture of the life she'd chosen. Sophie was harder. She was polite, even friendly sometimes, but there was a wall between them that Brenna didn't know how to break through. She'd catch Sophie watching her sometimes with an expression that mixed hope and suspicion, as if she was waiting for Brenna to prove she was just like before, unreliable, ready to disappear at the first sign of difficulty. Brenna couldn't blame her. She'd earned that suspicion. On the 4th week, Brenna arrived at the apartment with supplies for teaching Lucy to weave friendship bracelets, the tradition that had passed from Brenna to Sophie to Lucy's locket. She spread the colourful threads on the kitchen table and showed Lucy the basic patterns, her hands moving through motions she hadn't used in decades, but somehow remembered perfectly. "Like this," she said, guiding Lucy's small fingers through the weave. "Over, under, pull tight. The key is keeping the tension even." Lucy's tongue stuck out in concentration as she worked. Sophie watched from the kitchen, pretending to do dishes but clearly paying attention. "Mom, come help," Lucy called. "You know how to do this." Sophie hesitated, then came over, drying her hands on a towel. She sat across from Brenna, the table between them, and picked up a set of threads. "I haven't done this in 25 years, Sophie said. "It comes back," Brenna said quietly. "Muscle memory." They worked in silence for a while, 3 generations around a kitchen table, weaving threads into patterns that meant more than decoration. Lucy chatted happily about school and her friends. Sophie's hands moved through the familiar motions, her face softening as the memories clearly came flooding back. "I used to make these for all my friends," Sophie said eventually. "I'd spend hours in my room making bracelets in different colors. You taught me on the cabin porch, remember? I was 12 and bored and complaining about mosquitoes." "I remember," Brenna said. "You were terrible at first, kept getting the pattern wrong. I got better. You did. You got good at a lot of things." Sophie looked up, meeting Brenna's eyes for a brief moment before looking away. "I had to. You taught me to be self-sufficient, even if you didn't mean to." The words had an edge, but not as sharp as before. Progress, maybe. Lucy held up her finished bracelet, crooked and loose, but recognizable. "Done. Can I make one for Emma? So she has one too?" Sophie's expression tightened. That's a nice thought, honey." "When do I get to meet her?" Lucy asked. "I want to meet my sister." "Soon," Sophie said vaguely. "She's with her dad for a few more weeks." But Brenna could see the truth in Sophie's face. She still hadn't decided whether to tell Emma about Flives. Brenna still hadn't figured out if introducing a grandmother who'd been absent for Emma's entire life would do more harm than good. That night, after Lucy went to bed, Sophie asked Brenna to stay for coffee. They sat in the small living room, the silence between them less hostile than before, but still heavy with unspoken things. "She's getting attached to you," Sophie said finally. "Lucy. She talks about you constantly. Tells everyone at school about her grandmother who lives in the mountains and saved her life. Is that a problem?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in 6 months. A year. Ask me when we see if you're still here, or if you've retreated back to your cabin and stopped answering calls. I'm not going anywhere." "You keep saying that." Sophie stared into her coffee cup. "Emma comes home next weekend. She's staying for Thanksgiving. I've been trying to figure out how to tell her about you." Brenna's heart jumped. "You're going to tell her?" "I think I have to." Lucy won't. Stop talking about her grandmother, and Emma's going to hear about it. Better it comes from me than from her 8-year-old sister who doesn't understand why it's complicated. What are you going to say? Sophie laughed bitterly. I have no idea. Hey, Emma, remember how I told you your grandmother was dead? Well, I lied. She's been alive this whole time, living 3 miles from where we go hiking, and she just decided to show up after 12 years? That should go over great. Sophie, I know you're trying, I can see you're trying, but trying doesn't erase the damage, Mom. It doesn't fix the hole you left in our lives. And I don't know how to explain to my 12-year-old daughter why her grandmother chose not to be there for any of it. Tell her the truth. Tell her I was broken and stupid and too proud to ask for help. Tell her I made the worst mistake of my life, and I'm spending whatever time I have left trying to fix it. That's not enough. I know it's not. But it's all I have. Sophie set her coffee down and rubbed her face tiredly. Emma's had a hard time. The divorce was ugly. Her dad remarried last year, and his new wife has 2 kids from a previous marriage. Emma feels like she doesn't quite fit anywhere, not with her dad's new family, not with me because I work so much. She's angry and hurt and looking for someone to blame, and I'm terrified that meeting you is going to give her one more person to be angry at. Maybe, or maybe it'll give her one more person who loves her. You don't even know her. I'd like to, if you'll let me. Sophie was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, Thanksgiving. Come for Thanksgiving dinner. Both girls will be here. You can meet Emma then. But I'm warning you, she's not Lucy. She's not going to be won over with survival lessons and bracelet making. She's been hurt, and she's defensive, and she's probably going to push you away. I can handle that. Can you? Because if you meet her and decide it's too hard, if you retreat back to your mountain because being a grandmother to a difficult teenager isn't as rewarding as being a hero to an 8-year-old, I will never forgive you. Do you understand? I will never forgive you. The weight of Sophie's words settled over them. This was it. This was the test. Show up for the hard parts or lose them forever. I'll be there, Brenna said. I promise. I will be there. The next week was agony. Brenna cleaned her cabin obsessively, trying to distract herself from her nervousness about meeting Emma. She practiced what she might say, how she might explain herself, how she might bridge 15 years of absence. She went into town and bought a gift, a leather-bound journal with a horse embossed on the cover, since Sophie had mentioned Emma loved horses. Then she second-guessed herself. Was it too much? Not enough? Too desperate? She called Michael for the first time in 15 years. The phone rang 4 times before a man's voice answered, cautious. Hello? Michael? It's your mother. Silence. Then, Mum? Yeah, it's me. I know it's been a long time. I know I have no right to call, but I wanted you to know I'm back. I'm trying to. Sophie and I are talking. I met Lucy. I'm meeting Emma at Thanksgiving. And I wanted you to know because you should know. Because I owe you an explanation too. More silence. Then Michael's voice, rough with emotion. 15 years, Mum. 15 years and not a word. I know. I'm so sorry. I was drowning, and I thought you were better off without me. That wasn't your decision to make. You're right. It wasn't. And I can't fix it. But if you're willing, I want to try to be part of your life again. I have a family, Mom. A wife. 2 kids. They don't know you. Don't know anything about you except that you disappeared after Dad died. Brenna's heart clenched. More grandchildren. More family she'd missed. I'd like to meet them. Someday. If you're willing. No pressure. Just someday. Michael was quiet. Then, Sophie told me you saved Lucy, that you kept her alive in that storm. I did. That's something. That means something to me. That you were there when she needed you. I should have been there all along. Yeah, you should have. He paused. Look, I need time to process this. to talk to my wife, to figure out what I want. But I'm not saying no. I'm saying I need time. That's fair. That's more than fair. Call me after Thanksgiving. Let me know how it goes with Emma, and we'll figure something out. Maybe. It was the best Brenna could hope for. Thank you, Michael, for not hanging up, for giving me a chance. Don't thank me yet. Prove you mean it first. He hung up. Brenna sat on her porch, Tom's compass in her hand, and cried for the first time since the day they'd buried him. Not grief this time, but relief, and fear, and hope. Thanksgiving morning dawned cold and clear. Brenna dressed carefully in her cleanest clothes, packed the journal for Emma, and drove down the mountain with her hands shaking on the wheel. She was about to meet her second granddaughter, about to face the consequences of 15 years of absence, about to find out if Sophie was right to trust her or right to doubt her. The apartment door was decorated with a handmade Happy Thanksgiving banner, clearly Lucy's work. Brenna stood in front of it for a full minute, gathering courage, before she knocked. Sophie opened the door. Behind her, Brenna could see Lucy setting the table, and on the couch, a girl with Sophie's features and a teenager's defensive posture, watching Brenna with guarded eyes. "Emma." "Come in, Mom," Sophie said, stepping aside. "Everyone's waiting." Brenna stepped across the threshold into her daughter's home, into the family she'd abandoned, into the second chance she didn't deserve but desperately wanted. Whatever happened next would determine everything. Lucy ran over immediately, chattering about the turkey Sophie was cooking and the pie she'd helped make. But Brenna's attention was on Emma, who hadn't moved from the couch, who was studying Brenna with the kind of analytical assessment that came from a childhood spent learning to protect yourself. "Emma," Sophie said, her voice gentle but firm. "This is your grandmother, Brenna." Emma stood slowly, politeness clearly warring with suspicion. She was tall for 12, almost Sophie's height, with long dark hair pulled into a ponytail and eyes that had seen more disappointment than any child should have to. "Hi," Emma said flatly. "Hi," Brenna replied, staying where she was, not pushing for a hug or false familiarity. "It's really good to meet you. Your mum's told me a lot about you." "Funny. She never told me anything about you." The words were sharp, accusatory. Sophie stepped forward. "Emma, it's okay," Brenna said quietly. "She's right. She has every reason to be angry." Emma's eyes narrowed. "I'm not angry. I don't care enough to be angry. You're just some lady, my mom says, is my grandmother, but who's never been around for anything important in my life, so what's the point?" "Emma, that's enough," Sophie said, her voice firm now. "I know this is hard, but Brenna is family. She made mistakes, but she's trying to make things right. Why now? What changed?" Emma looked directly at Brenna. "Lucy told me you saved her, that you're some kind of mountain woman who knows everything about survival. That's great. Good for you. But where were you when Mom was crying herself to sleep because her mother wouldn't return her calls? Where were you when I was born? Where were you for 12 years? The questions hit like hammers. Brenna forced herself to hold Emma's gaze, to not look away from the hurt and anger she'd caused. "I wasn't there," Brenna said simply. "And there's no excuse for that. Your mom came to see me when she was pregnant with you. She asked me to be part of your life, and I said no. I told her I didn't have anything left to give. I was wrong. I was grieving my husband, your grandfather, and I let that grief turn me into someone who hurt the people I loved most. So, you're here now because you feel guilty? I'm here because I was given a second chance I don't deserve, and I don't want to waste it. And because I have 2 granddaughters who I'd like to know, if they're willing to know me." "Lucy already loves you," Emma said bitterly. "She won't shut up about you, about how brave and cool and amazing you are. She thinks you're a hero. I'm not a hero. I know you're not a hero. Heroes show up. They don't hide in the mountains for 15 years while their family falls apart. Emma, please, Sophie said, tears in her eyes. But Emma wasn't done. Did you know Mum worked double shifts for 2 years when I was little? That she'd come home so tired she could barely stand, but she'd still help me with homework and make me dinner and read me bedtime stories? Did you know when Dad left, she cried for a week but never let me see because she didn't want me to worry? Did you know she's the best mom in the world, and she did it all without you? I did know, Brenna said, her voice breaking, because your mom is stronger than I ever was. She's better than I ever was, and you're right, she did it all without me, and I hate myself for that every single day. Emma's defensive posture cracked slightly. Then why should I give you a chance now? Why should any of us? It was the question Brenna had been asking herself for weeks. She pulled out the journal she'd brought, held it for a moment, then set it on the coffee table. I don't know if you should. That's up to you. But I brought this because your mum said you love horses, and I thought maybe you could use a journal to write about them, or to write about how angry you are at me, or whatever you need to write about. Emma looked at the journal but didn't reach for it. I also brought this, Brenna said, pulling the old photograph from her pocket, the one showing her and Tom and Michael and Sophie as a family. This was us. Before I broke everything, your grandfather, your mum, your uncle, we were happy once, really happy. And then your grandfather died, and I forgot how to be happy, forgot how to be anything except sad. And I convinced myself that sadness was all I had left to give, so I should keep it to myself. She handed the photo to Emma, who took it reluctantly. That's your mom when she was about Lucy's age. She looks just like Lucy, doesn't she? Emma studied the photo, her expression softening despite herself. Yeah, she does. 3 generations of stubborn, brave, beautiful women, Brenna said softly. I'm sorry I missed so much of yours, Emma. And I understand if you don't want me around, but I'm asking anyway for a chance to get to know you, to be the grandmother I should have been from the start. Emma was quiet for a long time, the photo in her hands, her walls still up but starting to show cracks. Finally, she looked up at Brenna, and her eyes were shining with unshed tears. Do you really want to know me? Or are you just here because of Lucy? I really want to know you, both of you. Your mom, your uncle and his family, everyone I walked away from. I want to know all of it, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. The hard parts mean showing up when it's not convenient, when I'm being difficult, or when Lucy's having a bad day, or when Mum needs help and it's not some dramatic rescue. I know. Do you? Because it's easy to show up for Thanksgiving dinner. It's harder to show up for the boring stuff. The everyday stuff. Brenna thought about 15 years of boring, everyday solitude, about how easy it had been to stay gone, how much harder it was to come back. You're right, but I'm ready to try, if you'll let me. Emma set the photo down carefully and picked up the journal, running her fingers over the embossed horse on the cover. I'll think about it, she said finally. That's all I can promise right now. That's enough, Brenna said. That's more than enough. The tension broke when Lucy announced the timer was going off and Sophie needed to check the turkey. Emma retreated to her room, taking the journal with her. Brenna stood in the living room, feeling like she'd just survived an interrogation which, in a way, she had. Sophie squeezed Brenna's arm as she passed. That went better than I expected. She hates me. She doesn't hate you. She's protecting herself. Give her time. They set the table together, Sophie, Brenna and Lucy, 3 generations moving around each other in the small kitchen. It felt surreal, domestic, like something from a life Brenna had forgotten she used to have. Can I show Grandma my room? Lucy asked Sophie. If she wants to see it. Lucy grabbed Brenna's hand and pulled her down the short hallway. Her room was small but cheerful, decorated with artwork and photos, and a shelf full of well-loved books. Lucy showed her everything, her rock collection, her favorite stuffed animals, the bracelet she'd made that matched the one Brenna had taught her to weave. This is my favorite picture, Lucy said, pointing to a frame on her nightstand. It showed Lucy and Sophie at the beach, both laughing, completely happy. That was last summer. Mom worked extra shifts to save money for a vacation. We got to stay in a hotel and everything. Brenna studied the photo, seeing the life Sophie had built despite everything. Despite Brenna's absence. Despite the difficulty of raising two daughters essentially alone. "Your mom is amazing," Brenna said. "I know." Lucy sat on her bed, suddenly serious. "Emma's mad at you. But she's not as mad as she pretends to be. She's just scared." "Scared of what?" "That you'll leave again. That's what. She told Mom last night when she thought I was asleep. She said she didn't want to get to know you because it would hurt too much when you left." The words gutted Brenna. "I'm not going to leave. That's what I told her, but she doesn't believe it yet." Lucy swung her legs, her expression wise beyond her years. "You have to prove it. Not with words. With showing up. Showing up." Emma had said the same thing. It was the test they'd all set for her, the only one that mattered. Be there, consistently, even when it was hard. "I will," Brenna promised. "I'll prove it." Emma emerged from her room when dinner was ready. She'd been crying, Brenna could tell by her red eyes, but she sat at the table with quiet dignity. Sophie served the turkey and fixings, and they passed dishes around in careful politeness. "Should we say what we're thankful for?" Lucy asked. "We do that every year." "That's a good idea," Sophie said, though she looked nervous about where this might go. Lucy went, "First, I'm thankful Mom saved money for art classes, and I'm thankful Grandma Brenna found me in the woods, and I'm thankful Emma's home." Sophie went next. "I'm thankful you're both healthy and safe. I'm thankful for the family we have, complicated as it is, and I'm thankful for second chances." She looked at Brenna when she said that last part. Brenna's throat tightened. Emma picked at her food. "I'm thankful Mom's the best mom ever, and I'm thankful Lucy's okay. And I guess I'm thankful that some people are trying to do better, even if it's really late." It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't complete rejection either. Brenna would take it. "I'm thankful for all of you," Brenna said, her voice rough. "I'm thankful Lucy survived long enough for me to find her. I'm thankful Sophie gave me this chance. I'm thankful Emma's honest enough to tell me what she really thinks. And I'm thankful that somehow, despite everything I've done wrong, I get to sit at this table with my family." They ate in a less tense silence after that. Lucy chatted about school. Emma talked a little about the horses at her dad's property. Sophie shared a funny story from the hospital. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses and careful word choices, and moments when the weight of 15 lost years pressed down on all of them. But it was real. It was family. It was more than Brenna had allowed herself to hope for. After dinner, while Sophie and Emma cleared dishes, Lucy pulled Brenna aside. "Will you come back? For Christmas? If your mum says it's okay, she will. I know she will." Lucy hugged Brenna tight. "I love you, Grandma." The words hit Brenna like a lightning strike. She hugged Lucy back, this granddaughter who'd decided to love her despite having every reason not to, and felt something break open in her chest, not with pain this time, but with joy. "I love you too, sweetheart." Emma watched from the kitchen doorway, the journal tucked under her arm. She didn't say anything, but her expression had softened. Not forgiveness yet, but maybe the beginning of possibility. Sophie walked Brenna to the door when it was time to leave. They stood in the hallway, just the two of them, the sounds of the girls laughing in the apartment behind them. "Thank you," Brenna said, "for today, for giving me this. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. The hard part is sustaining it. I know, and I will. I promise you, Sophie, I will show up." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I want to believe you." "Then let me prove it." They stood there for a moment, mother and daughter, so much history between them, so much damage that needed healing. Then Sophie did something Brenna hadn't expected. She hugged her. It was brief, awkward, but real. When she pulled back, she was crying openly. "Don't make me regret this." Sophie whispered. "I won't. I swear I won't." Brenna drove back up the mountain that night with Lucy's painting on the Edvord passenger seat, Emma's guarded hope in her heart, and Sophie's hug still warming her skin. The cabin was waiting, familiar and isolating as ever. But for the first time in 15 years, it didn't feel like home. Home was back down the mountain, in a small apartment with her daughter and granddaughters, waiting for her to prove she meant what she said. Home was wherever her family was, and she was finally ready to fight to be part of it. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, Brenna stood on her cabin porch in the pre-dawn darkness, Tom's compass in her hand, making a decision that would change everything. The cabin had been her refuge for 15 years, her fortress, her prison. Every log, every board, every nail held memories of Tom, of the life they'd built together, of the grief she'd wrapped around herself like armor. But it was time to stop hiding. She'd spent the weeks since Thanksgiving proving herself. She'd driven down the mountain every other day, helped Sophie with grocery shopping, picked Lucy up from art class when Sophie had late shifts, even spent an awkward but not entirely uncomfortable afternoon watching Emma ride horses at a stable outside town, standing at the fence rail as her granddaughter showed off her jumping skills. Emma was warming up slowly. She'd started texting Brenna occasionally, nothing deep, just small things. A photo of a horse she'd drawn, a question about mountain plants for a school project. Each text felt like a tiny bridge being built, plank by plank, across 15 years of absence. Sophie was still guarded, but trying. They'd had coffee twice, just the two of them, talking carefully around the hurt while trying to find common ground. Sophie had told her about nursing school, about the divorce, about the compromises she'd made to give her daughters good lives. Brenna had listened and learned about the woman. Her daughter had become strong and resilient and remarkable. But Brenna knew that driving up and down the God mountain several times a week wasn't sustainable. She was 63, and the mountain was unforgiving. Winter was coming, and once the snow hit, that dirt road would be impassable for months. She had a choice: retreat to the cabin and prove Emma right that she'd disappear when it got inconvenient, or find another way. She looked around the porch one more time. Lucy's painting hung inside, visible through the window. Emma's first text was saved on her phone. Sophie's tentative hug lived in her memory. The cabin had kept her safe from pain, but it had also kept her from joy. She knew what Tom would say. Hell, she knew what she would have said to someone else in her position. Stop being a coward and choose your family. So she did. By December, Brenna had rented a small apartment in Ridgemont, 10 minutes from Sophie's place. She kept the cabin, couldn't quite bear to sell it. Not yet, but she moved her essential belongings down the mountain. The Winchester rifle, Tom's compass, the photograph of their family, Lucy's painting. Sophie helped her move, though she'd been skeptical at first. "You're really doing this? Leaving your cabin?" "It's not leaving, it's expanding, making room for other things besides grief." "What if you hate town? What if you miss the mountains too much? Then I'll hike up to the cabin on weekends, but I'll come back down, because Lucy has soccer practice on Tuesdays, and Emma has horse shows some Saturdays, and you work odd shifts and need help. And I want to be here for all of it." Sophie had looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but if you change your mind, I won't." And she didn't. The apartment was small and bare at first, but Lucy helped decorate, hanging drawings on the walls and insisting Brenna needed plants and colorful pillows. Emma contributed a framed photo of the three of them, Brenna, Emma, and Lucy, taken at the horse stable. It wasn't perfect. Emma was barely smiling and clearly still uncertain. But it was real. Christmas came. Brenna spent it at Sophie's apartment with both girls, Michael and his family joining via video call. It was awkward and wonderful and overwhelming. Lucy gave her a handmade bracelet. Emma gave her a card with a horse drawing and a note that said simply, "Thank you for trying, Emma." Brenna cried, reading it. Sophie hugged her longer this time, more genuine. "You're really doing it," Sophie said quietly. "Showing up. I told you I would. People say a lot of things. You're actually doing it." January brought snow and cold and the routines of everyday life. Brenna picked Lucy up from school twice a week, helped Sophie with groceries, took Emma to the library to research horse breeding for a school project. She got a part-time job at the outdoor supply store, teaching survival skills classes on weekends. She made friends with neighbors. She learned to live in the world again. It wasn't always easy. There were days Emma was distant. Days Sophie's carefully rebuilt trust seemed fragile. Days Brenna missed the simplicity of her mountain solitude. But she stayed. She showed up. She proved, day by day, that this time was different. On a cold afternoon in late February, almost 4 months after she'd found Lucy in the woods, Brenna was making dinner in her apartment when there was a knock at the door. Emma stood there alone, backpack slung over one shoulder, the journal Brenna had given her clutched in her hands. "Mum said I could walk over," Emma said. "If that's okay." "Of course it's okay. Come in. Are you hungry?" Emma came inside, looking around the small apartment like she was seeing it for the first time, even though she'd been here before. "I wrote something. In the journal. I wanted. Can I read it to you?" Brenna's heart skipped. "Please." They sat on the couch, and Emma opened the journal with careful fingers. The pages were filled with handwriting, drawings of horses, scattered thoughts. She found the page she wanted and began to read. "I was mad when I found out I had a grandmother who'd been alive all this time but never cared enough to meet me. I wanted to hate her. But then I met her and she was just a person. Not a hero like Lucy thinks. Not a villain like I wanted her to be. Just a person who made really bad choices and is trying to fix them. And I guess I'm learning that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what someone did. It's about deciding they're worth a second chance anyway." "You're worth a second chance, Grandma. I think maybe I'm ready to try having you in my life. For real this time. Not just visiting, but actually being family. If you still want that." Emma looked up, vulnerable in a way Brenna had never seen before. "Do you? Still want that?" Brenna couldn't speak for a moment. She pulled Emma into a hug reel this time, not careful or hesitant, but genuine. More than anything in the world. Emma hugged her back, and Brenna felt 15 years of mistakes begin to transform into something else. Not erased, that wasn't possible, but redeemed, somehow, by this brave girl's willingness to try. When Sophie came to pick Emma up later, she found them at the kitchen table, weaving bracelets together, Emma teaching Brenna a new pattern she'd learned online. Sophie stood in the doorway watching them, and when Brenna looked up, her daughter was crying. "What's wrong?" Brenna asked, alarmed. "Nothing's wrong." Sophie wiped her eyes, smiling. "Everything's right. Finally." That spring, on the anniversary of the day Brenna found Lucy in the woods, they all hiked up to the cabin together. Sophie, Lucy, Emma, even Michael and his family who'd driven in from Charlotte. The cabin was dusty from disuse, but still standing, still solid. They had a picnic on the porch. Lucy found the spot where Brenna had first heard the does cry and declared it magical. Emma explored the forest with her cousins. Michael and Brenna talked about Tom, sharing memories, healing old wounds. And Sophie stood with Brenna at the porch rail, looking out over the mountains that had hidden her mother for so long. "Do you ever regret it?" Sophie asked. "Leaving the cabin? Coming back to town?" Brenna thought about it honestly. "Sometimes I miss the quiet, the simplicity, but no, I don't regret it. I regret the 15 years I lost. But not the coming back, never the coming back. I'm glad you did. We all are. Even Emma? Especially Emma. She won't say it yet, but she needs you. They both do. I need them too. I didn't realize how much until I had them back." They stood together in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, watching the sun paint the mountains gold. In the clearing below, barely visible through the trees, a doe stood watching them. Whole and healed, the arrow wound long since mended. Brenna raised a hand in acknowledgement. The doe watched for another moment, then disappeared into the forest. Some things couldn't be explained. The cry that had stopped her from taking the shot, the way the deer had led her to Lucy, the impossible coincidence that had brought her back to family. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was grace. Whatever it was, Brenna was grateful. The cabin would always be there, a reminder of where she'd been. But home was down the mountain now, in a small apartment near her daughter and granddaughters, in a life she was building day by day, in the family she'd almost lost forever. She'd spent 15 years learning to live with silence. Now she was learning to live with love. And it turned out, love was louder.